Hey everyone, this is Nick from the Botch Pit, and today we're going to be talking about a sourcebook called World of Darkness, Armory Reloaded for the Chronicles of Darkness. At this time, I would like to note that this is the second entry of 3 broadcasts regarding weaponry in the World of Darkness. The first being World of Darkness Armory, and the third being Chronicles of Darkness Hurt Locker. Each one highlights weaponry in different ways, and it wasn't fitting to combine them all into one video. However, when all of them are put together in order, it gives a greater bird's eye view of the entire subject matter, as well as additional ideas that can be implemented. Armory Reloaded is a successor to Armory. However, where Armory covers the classic, expected weaponry, such as handguns and baseball bats, Armory Reloaded describes a seriously dangerous weaponry that turns the violence volume knob to 11 and breaks it off. Its sections are divided into storied weapons, which are weapons that have been blessed or cursed by the horrors within the World of Darkness, which aren't measured in cost of resources, but what one is willing to sacrifice by having it. Fighting styles, which are more expanded upon than their Armory counterparts. Future weapons that focus primarily on high-tech horror sci-fi storylines, and combat hacks, which focus on the combat mechanics of the storytelling system and tries to put them into greater perspective across multiple different core books. For this broadcast, I'm going to focus primarily on these first 2 sections, and for the last 2, I'm going to provide some creative insight on what you can do within the storytelling system to propel these ideas. The core theme of Armory Reloaded is that combat is horror, and it serves to jack up the action in your games. Combat is seriously scary business. Blood splattering in the mud. People screaming their lungs out. The smell of burning gasoline on human flesh drilling through someone's nostrils. Lures of white flashes as bombs eradicate innocent people. A vampire digging his claws into a man's chest, pulling and tearing his guts so that they spill out as his wife, who stands 10 feet away, cries so hard she breaks a rib. Combat should be terrifying, and it's a brutal, nasty affair. This book seeks to help fine-tune that level of combat and violence in your games to ensure that you're hitting the right notes of terror and horror. When it comes to pop culture, this is the book that you will use to be able to flesh out a more action horror-based storyline. Films that would somewhat fit the genre in the World of Darkness setting could be something like Aliens, I Am Legend, Predator, etc. I also want to mention, specifically in regards to the future weapons section, I relate this heavily to the Men in Black series, especially that noisy cricket, where this is tech that could potentially exist, however it's out of the everyday person's hands. The first chapter, called Storied Weapons, details accounts of certain weapons throughout history and mythology in the World of Darkness. The definition of the word storied can stem either from A, recorded or celebrated in history or story, such as the storied cities of ancient Greece, or B, ornamented with designs representing historical, legendary, or similar objects. Either or, both of these definitions depict weapons held in great pride, which possibly links to some horrific legend. Yes, the tales that accompany these weapons have an immortalized history that the wielder has a terrible price to pay before using it. This cost is primarily story-driven, having characters perform certain actions in order to even obtain the weapons, let alone use it. And the consequences of accepting the weapon and cheating out on the deeds it needs to commit could end up having characters and more catastrophic consequences than performing what it actually thirsts for. These weapons are both blessings as well as curses. The second chapter, named Fighting Styles, reworks the previous fighting style merits from Armory in addition to providing an expansion on their offerings. It also starts by illustrating how fighting styles stack, both with humans as well as the supernatural, and the restrictions that they impose in play. The reason why this was updated was to allow players more option within the fighting idiom. For a quick example, think action movie stars versus mixed martial artists. 2 completely different frameworks of fighting. Now, fighting style merits are broken down into 3 separate classifications of core styles, specialized styles, and compound styles. Core styles are designed to cover a generic form of combat, for an example, throwing, but it also has a specific style, name, and background, example, Aikido, associated with it. If you want a specific background associated with this style, for example, Judo, it uses the same rules as Aikido. The second classification, specialized styles, are these inner working variants of the core style. Also, I want to somewhat reiterate this over and over in every recording, is that when you pick these merits, they need to be incorporated into the story somehow, and you can't be picking up different backgrounds every time you use this style. You need to consult with your storyteller on what you can and cannot do with this given character. Finally, compound fighting styles are complete arts, where they act as a collection of fighting style merits. For example, striking, grappling, and weapons taught within the same training system. Each style lists the name component based on their core style names. Throwing, not the backgrounds based in core styles. Aikido. Although there is no game system advantage for learning a compound style, merits cost the same and have the same restrictions. The significant social advantage is that students don't need to seek out an additional teacher to learn each merit. This being stated, depending on the storyteller, these instructors may not know every merit the student requires, and learning the compound fighting style is an incredibly time-consuming process as a result. As mentioned before, I'm going to be somewhat creative when I talk about the next two sections, future weapons and combat hacks. The reasoning for this is, although the book does a really excellent job of laying everything out, I like to think of these two sections as more ethereal thoughts of, the concept of future weaponry in general and the concept of combat hacks in general. Although the previous two sections were awesome, I feel like the most value for myself personally is because of these next two sections. The concept of future weaponry in the world of darkness can be awe-inspiring, to say the least. The unknown, in some sort of way, allows for more creative results from both the storyteller and the player. As a quick example, think more not just like Men in Black that I mentioned before, but think more like the gravity gun in Half-Life 2, or potentially in BioShock the Plasmids, or something to that effect, where it has some destructive end goal, but the creativity the players need to use in order to accomplish that can be something different that you haven't experienced with something, say, like Armory. And that's what's so cool about it. You don't really know what's going to happen if you give these high-tech weapons, these almost alien type of weaponry, to the everyday person. How are they going to handle it? And so on and so forth. And it also allows for that extra little bit of horror of the unknown to kind of creep its way into your story. In the world of darkness exists this weapons manufacturer, the sinister Ganadushi arms dealer, who is the core creator of all these future weapons. And this book actually stats out and gives ideas for the weapons that these people produce. And for me, this faceless corporation that's dealing in arms to destroy is an excellent story hook. Now, they not only produce weapons in terms of firearms and stuff like that, but it's also armor and other types of gadgets that would help turn the tides in any type of battle or even war. At this point, I hope you're beginning to see the creativity that you can take by just using this very simple core concept. Finally, the last section, combat hacks, talks about the damage that someone goes through, and is the beginnings to where I kind of want to lead into Hurt Locker, which is the third broadcast. However, I'd like to mention it here that it's really cool to see for the everyday person who doesn't really roleplay all too much. This section really helps illustrate the things you can do as not just a mortal, but also as a supernatural in order to survive a little bit better. This includes things such as team tactics, what you ought to do if you're bleeding out in some sort of way, and a very general idea of these different scenarios you can be put in and the creativity you can use within those scenarios to potentially escape. It is definitely an eye-opening section, and like I said, I'm going to cover more of this in the third broadcast. However, it is an awesomely written section and you ought to read it. Honestly, when I began playing the Chronicles of Darkness and if someone handed me this book, my characters would have survived so much longer than what they did. And I feel that whenever I'm going to run a game in the future, this is a section specifically within this book that I'm going to hand to new players. So if this sounds like something you potentially need, because, I mean, to be quite honest, I did when I started, I highly advise reading this section in thorough detail. You know, on the other side, storytellers, now you know how to damage people a little bit more. I eat Cheerios because they're heart healthy, and my heart has been severely damaged. So, Chris, if you're out there. So I'm not sure who I'm really helping here, but it's a good time regardless. This has been Nick from the Botch Pit. Thank you.